Hello, gorgeous people. Okay, we've got Scott Brick, we've got Landon Beach. Such was my excitement to have our next two guests with us. Now, Landon reached out to me and he said, I'm doing this book, I'm narrating it. Would you be okay to do a blurb? And I thought, oh my God. Okay, honestly, I thought, I don't have time to read a manuscript that I'm not actually narrating because I can't remember the last time I had time to actually read that wasn't work. But then I kind of peeked on Amazon and saw that every single one of Landon's thrillers were the kind of book that I would kill to read / listen to at any time because he's my kind of writer. And then I thought, well, that's interesting. It's always good to have connection with a writer. Then I found out Scott Brick is his narrator. I thought, well, nobody can touch that. And then I heard that there's this relationship, that they're actually friends, and the book is about us. The head protagonist is a narrator. So you can't get better than that. Still, I thought, I'm going to cheat a little bit and skim because I'm too busy to read a whole manuscript. So I gave myself an hour on a recording day and started skimming. Landon will attest to the fact that he received a couple of weirdly raving emails from me that throughout the day going, oh my God, this is really good. And then I think another one, wait a minute. Okay, I was only going to skim, full disclosure, but I can't stop. It's really good. And then in the end, when I found a little surprise, I won't give away spoilers, in the actual book, I was really beside myself to the point that I think poor Landon was like, okay, this woman's a little bit off center. It's good, you guys. It's good. I don't care about my no promo rule. This book is good. Scott Brick is good. And this book is about us. And when you listen to an audiobook, you want to put yourself in the place of the protagonist. I want to smell the coffee they made in the Mr. Coffee machine. I want to feel like I'm every man in some town in America and unusual, unfortunate circumstances happen. I want to be there. And this book does exactly what it says on the cover. And so I'm going to jump in. I want to get a little bit of background. I want to delve into Scott and Landon and their relationship and how this all started. And I'm going to start with something that occurred to me with the amount of people that contacted me when they found out that Scott Brick was doing a call. And I was wondering, because of course I knew you by reputation. I knew Scott Brick, everyone knows Scott Brick, you're famous. And Johnny has said that as well. That's uncomfortable because then you're not making the person a person. It's their name comes before them and they're not a person. But with me, it was the call that you had. I couldn't figure out what you did, but you were so open and authentic. And it didn't seem like you were actually trying to be open and authentic. It reminded me of, I mean this is a compliment, people have all different politics, reminded me of Bill Clinton. Because what they said about Bill Clinton was, it doesn't matter if you hate his guts or his politics, if you meet the man in person, you love him. You just do. And I've been fielding emails from people today, and since they found out about this call, going, Scott's really nice. I met Scott, he was really nice to me. And that's how I felt when you came on that call. Scott really liked me. And that's what it is about you. You give energy to people. And I really like that. And then I can see why you and Landon are friends, because Landon doesn't have a weird side. He's just enthusiastic and nice. There aren't a lot of people like that anymore, especially thriller writers. Do you know what I mean? Right. So I'm going to jump in. Who wants to start telling me how you two met? Scott, Landon, should I make it easy and pick on one of you?
I could start, since I reached out to Scott in the beginning, Daniela. So let's go back to around 2007. I had been writing for about 4 years.
Wait, can I go further than that? What was it you did before you became a writer again?
So before I became a writer, I was a naval officer, a surface warfare officer, and then I was a high school English teacher. I taught 12th graders for 15 years before becoming a full-time writer.
Both very hardcore professions.
Pretty intense, but
Yes.
but rewarding, and I love them. It was
And were you a thriller fan before you started writing thrillers?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've always loved reading those, escapism, any time of the year, but primarily summer reads. That's, you know, when we all like to escape and just get away.
Now, did you like just, right, I have this dream, I'm quitting, I'm going to do it, and then just stare down the barrel of a typewriter one day with a cup of black coffee and Twitter next to you? Or how did you get the guts to jump into it?
Well, I've always loved writing, and I wrote short stories and papers, and started a book when I was young, but it was really when I was still in the military, just this urge to write. I read a book and I said, I would love to write a book like that, something that I would like to read. And so I remember I went down to a Borders in Jacksonville and I picked up this little slim volume called You Can Write a Novel. And I started planning out characters, and I wrote my first draft, which was horrible. But I did finish a book, which a lot of people don't do. And I said that has to mean something. And I kept at it. And then to tie that into Scott, I was in Florida and I'm from Michigan. And so in the summer, we would always drive up, my wife and I, and visit family up in Michigan. And we made it a habit of getting an audiobook or two to listen on the way up. And it was I admit that it was more her idea than mine, because I am very much the school of reading and close reading and marking up text, but I grew to love it. And so I've been reading David Baldacci for years at that point, and we had our summer trip coming up. And I had forgotten about this because I thought we got it from the library, but then I remember I was finishing my first year teaching high school, and his book, Simple Genius, came out. And I said, oh my gosh, why don't we listen to that on the way up to Michigan? And so my wife said, hey, I'm game. And we got just across the Georgia border, and we're listening to this, and it's Scott Brick, and I've never heard Scott narrate before. And I think she picked up the book. And so I just said to her, she's in the passenger side, I said, who is that? Who is narrating this? Because like many
that's what we all said the first time we heard Scott narrate.
I said, I'm in a trance here. This is amazing. And I'll never forget, she looked over, she picked it up, and I've been saving this for this call. You ready? It's not as good as Scott's career story that he tells about Dan Musselman. I mean, if there's a dictionary and it says career, there should be a link to Scott Brick, Dan Musselman story. But I found this in my garage. When we went into COVID, we all moved a lot of stuff into our garages and stuff from work. And I had forgotten about this. This is where I thought it was a library, but here it is. This is
wow.
Oh my God. That's the CD copy.
This is what we bought. And
in the car, you could play a CD in the car.
Right. So we played CDs, and here it is. It's all beat up, but it was in my garage, and it made its way into my office closet. So I didn't have the moment Scott had where he was, stone cold frozen and said, this is my career with the card. But I was talking to Mary. I said, I found the CDs. I found the ones that the first time I ever heard Scott narrate. And so I thought this would be the appropriate place to show that I had found that just a few weeks ago. And so anyways, sorry for that little bit of a, addition to the story.
I love that. That was charming. Okay. So you're listening to Scott Brick. You think he's amazing. Now, have you already started writing at this point, your own books?
Yes.
Okay.
I had finished my first book, and then the book that would later become The Wreck. I had just started the first draft of that in 2007. And Scott knows that didn't come out until 2018. So that took 11 years to come out. So
Can
fast.
I interject? I have to tell you something that I've been thinking. Narrators could learn a lot from you, because the way you approach promo is exactly what we need to channel. And it's really hard when you're like,
Yep.
worried about things. You promote things like you're really excited to show everyone. And that makes people receive it and they feel good about it, rather than you're pushing things on people. And I love that. And you're not shy about it. You promo the hell out of things, and you make it an enjoyable experience. I think all narrators could learn that from you. Did you know that in the beginning, instinctually?
Oh, well, thank you for that, Daniela. I know that I'm a little amped up and emotional today because it has taken 19 years for me to reach today, which is the release of my first book as a full-time writer. And so it means an awful lot to me today to be on this and to release that book. It took 6 with Scott, but it finally happened. And so I'm really excited about that.
Well, we're honored to have you.
Well, in terms of, promoting, that's the thing where publishing has changed so much, because when you're an indie and there are viable ways for you to put your stuff out, and I always try to not put it out of like, hey, look at me, I'm just amazing. But if you are not an advocate for yourself, no one else is going to do it. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't have friends and others that are going to help you out as well, and family members, but you have to. It's almost a prerequisite to do that. So I always say, control what you can control, but let go of everything that you can't. And so to tie that in, we got to around 2018 and I came out with my first novel, The Wreck. My wife and I had 2 girls. And as you know, you have children, life kind of takes a little bit of a pause and stop. But finally, she said to me, you're either going to put this book out on Amazon or else I am behind your back.
By the way,
okay.
I just love your wife.
Thank you.
Right?
She should be getting like a commission for managerial fees, basically.
Yeah, we're going to have our little family launch party tonight, which we always have. It's just the 4 of us. That's something that we've kind of protected for each book. But
I think it's lovely. I think it's lovely.
So I had that come out, and then I wrote The Sale, and I wrote a book called The Cabin.
I got The Cabin.
Yay! And they placed in a few contests, and we got to the point where we were thinking about, it's time to expand the business for audiobooks. And she said, well, who are you thinking? And there was one person in mind, and I said, do you remember the guy that read that book that we listened to in 2007 on the way up to Michigan?
And what year is this now? What year is this now?
This is 2019.
Okay,
So
wow.
so that's 12 years later, right? And so I did a little research, and I found that Scott worked with a few indies, but I know that it's really competitive and that he can't work with everyone. And so I got to a point where I thought I had enough on my resume where I could approach him. And so I contacted his just amazing business manager, Gina Smith, who's just been so sweet and supportive all the way through. And I remember typing the email, and we sent it, would Scott be interested in these 3 books? And she got back to us and said, Scott will take a look at The Wreck and we'll get back to you. And I have never had a more nervous week than waiting to hear what Scott might have said about, I said, this is it, but I felt we'd put our best foot forward. And then I'm sure the rest of the call, we'll be talking about how that evolved. But the first 3 books, I think Scott would agree, they were very traditional in terms of, here are the 3 books. It was a 3-book agreement, and he went and did his wonderful things, and then voila, they came out. And then the relationship grew after that. So thank you for allowing me to detail that, but it was just such a neat thing. Some people have asked me, they said, well, how do you go about getting a narrator? And all I can tell them is start reading David Baldacci books.
So when you listen to your books for the first time, how did it feel? Did it feel like they sounded the way they did in your head? This is a big thing with narrators. Or did it feel like they sounded like they were brought to life and made, because I'm listening to The Cabin now, thoroughly enjoying it. Did it did it feel like the characters were created? How did it feel? I'm putting words in your mouth. You tell me how it felt.
I would say that today would make my fourth moment in publishing that I will never forget, but the first three were the day that I finished, the moment I finished my first novel, my first draft. The second was when I held the first proof in my hand that came in the mail. And the third was when Gina had posted on Scott Brick Presents, a preview for the rec, and the first time I heard my words said by Scott. Those, and then today releasing Narrator. And I'll tell you, it was surreal. It was amazing. But I also heard some things when I listened to the first book that have made me a better writer. And to explain that, I would say I'm very much from the old school when I can, and I slip up now and then, but I like the dialogue tags, he said, she said, because it puts the onus and the power on the words. And lazy writing usually starts with adverbs, those ly words, like he spoke quickly, or he ran quickly. He sprinted is much stronger than he ran quickly. And so what I realized, and I never, at that point, I wasn't writing thinking about how it would sound being narrated. But after I heard the rec, I said, wow. And Scott does an incredible job of kind of throwing those tags away and keeping the focus on the actual words. But I challenged myself from there on out to say, can I use he said and she said less in my writing? And I think it's made it a much more enjoyable listen. And that's something I never would have thought of before hearing my own works. That's something that comes to mind that has helped me become a better writer, because I never wrote with audiobooks in mind to begin with. Now, every book that I write, that's a lot of what I think about is I wonder how it'll sound when Scott does this.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I think that's where the magic is, with the communication between the narrator and the writer between books. I think that's where the most magic. I mean, each book is its own thing, and the narrator has to go, if on their own. They're kind of on their own. But between books, it's what you said. You listen, you give, you take. And I have had a question about narrator. It was sent direct, so I'm not sure if they want to say who's saying it, but that will be addressed later in the call. So let's go, if you don't mind, I'm going to segue a bit to Scott's impression when he first met Landon. Did you guys hop on a Zoom call? Did you think, okay, here's a 3-book deal, let's just jump in? How did that work out? Do you have great close relationships with all your writers? I know you work mostly with publishers. Tell us your side of the story.
Sure. I've kept silent up until now. There's been a lot of gushing, very kind words said about me, but I have to be firm. You've only got 20 more minutes to gush about me.
Don't worry.
I can fit it in. I'm going to cut you off.
I can fit it in.
I am struck by two things to answer your question, as maybe just to preface it. Landon spoke about two things. He mentioned David Baldacci, and I've worked on a lot of his early works. Haven't done any in a while, and it's so funny because my girlfriend Suzanne and I were just talking about him this morning. He sent me the kindest note when I had a significant birthday, which was my 12th annual 39th birthday. He sent along a note and he said, "Thank you for being the difference between the firefly and the fire," which I've always felt inspiring. I haven't done one of his books in at least 10 years, but I've always carried that with me. It was very kind.
I love that.
But then, and then Landon, he spoke about, writing the book that he wanted to read. And and for our colleagues in the audience, I encourage you to take anything that a writer says and switch out, like find and replace. If you were working in a Word document, where you see the word writer, switch out the word switch it to the word narrator. Stephen King said the bit of advice that everybody's given: if you want to be a better writer, read voraciously. And I always say, if you want to be a better narrator, read voraciously. And it's because I love thrillers, genuinely love them so much. When Landon got in touch and said, do you want to do these 3 books? I was like, sure. And I knew that there were going to be 2 more in that series, let alone any more that would be coming down the line. To answer your question, Daniela, when we first spoke, it was largely third person, because a triangulated communication, I should say, to be more specific, because he was working with Gina because I was off doing other things, and she's my production manager. And frankly, our first genuine, face-to-face or even on a phone communication was in a raffle that we did. Landon, was it after the 3rd volume in series?
After
it was
the cabin, yeah.
It was the cabin, right? Okay.
The first summer of COVID, right at the end, August, right?
Where we were all still struggling to find a way to get groceries delivered to us, so we wouldn't have to go out and face the crowds, and obviously pre-vaccine. We came up with this idea. Whoever wins can have dinner with Landon and Scott. And the way that we worked it out was, we did it through our websites, and the winner was chosen. And then we sent him and his family like a $200 gift card for Uber Eats or, DoorDash or, wherever it is.
Lovely.
Yeah. And we spent a 3-way Zoom call. I think we had agreed upon an hour, but Landon backed me up. I think we were there for like 2.5 hours.
It was. We were talking about the history of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And
exactly. And just as a side note, and I'm blanking on his name, and I wish I could honor him by
Justin.
Yes. Okay. I was in Comic-Con, at Comic-Con 10 days ago, the weekend before last. And this guy walks up and I'm like, I know this guy. And Justin had flown out just to be there so he could meet me in person.
Wow.
And I well and truly felt honored to be able to spend the time that the 3 of us all spent together.
Yeah.
But what I noticed at that point was how open Landon was, not just to a friendship that was developing, because we found out we had so much in common.
Yeah.
Film references. I mean, come on, look, I've got a film library here right behind me. I adore old films, but I realized how open he was to, I don't want to use the word collaboration. Look, he writes the books, I read the books, I narrate the books, but whenever there was an issue, I could reach out and say, hey, just FYI, I think it might sound better versus the print version. It might sound better if we did this. And he was always open to that. And little did I know that maybe 2.5 years later, I get an email saying, hey, would you be open to a Zoom call? Because I'm working on this project that I could really use your input. And he had already proven himself to be one of the most open authors that I've ever worked with. And again, for everybody in the audience, the kind of relationship you want, because I know so many newcomers in the industry, let alone vets like Johnny Heller or Deanne Graham and Suzanne and I deal with, there's so much more work with indie authors being done. And I was delighted to find out, how the relationship develops. Whenever you're working with an author, remember that you're partnering with the author. And again, I remind myself, look, he wrote it, I'm reading it. And yet the audio production, it is a partnership.
And also the quality of the writing is gold. I mean, that's some seriously good quality. I have a writer like that when I do another book in his series, I do another book in his series, and I know for a fact that all I have to do is act, because he's so good. And it's there for you. And that's what Landon's book was like to me.
And And Daniela, I know that you've always had, because I've been a member of the Facebook group for a long time now, but very soon after you began, and I've watched a number of the interviews, and I know that you're always very careful to not do a promo. Okay, let's not just, you know, the phrase I always use is, let's not sit around licking ourselves like cats.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we don't need to post every single time that we have a book come out.
Right.
But
Forever.
Right, exactly. But as we talked about, as we were, the three of us were exchanging emails, and as we talked about in the pre-show, before everybody got let in, we're not here to sell you the book narrator. What we're here to sell you on is the relationship that can happen between an author and the narrator, and what can
also,
come as a result.
This book is different. I consider this book different because it is the first book that is us. The subject, to me, is what makes this permissible, which is, it's not just a promo call, because it's a genius idea. And the question I'd had, one of the questions I'd had from Barbara was, how did Landon come up with the plot of Narrator? It's a genius because nobody, I mean, I'm in the UK. Still, if I tell people I'm an audiobook narrator, they just give me that nice, they don't understand. They're assuming it's because of my accent. They don't know what I'm on about, right? I'm obviously mixing with the wrong people. So you honored us by making, every single person on this call and every single person in the Cup of Joe is part of your project because it's about us. So to me, this isn't promo. Do you know what I mean? And that, I think, is where the difference lies in my mind. If it was just, I feel like I wouldn't have been able to justify, oh, we're going to talk about the relationship if it's like another thriller about something else, because then it'd be like, all my writers could have come on and done that. But this is so intriguing. And it was the first question that came up. And I don't know if you want to field it or if Landon wants to field it. Barbara wants to know, how did Landon come up with the plot of the Narrator? And then how did that...
I can start, and Scott, if you want to add in things, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. One thing I would like to say before I start, and just to everybody who is on this call, just the tremendous amount of respect that I have for all of you as narrators. The research that I did for this, it gave me a level of appreciation for your art and your craft and your dedication that I was not aware of. And a part of Narrator is it's meant for fun and relaxation and escapism, but it is also, in a way, my love story, my love letter to storytellers and storytelling. So I wanted to make sure that I got that in there, that we didn't get to the end of the call, but just kudos to you and thank you for everything that you do to bring these stories to life. You are valued. Just know that.
It comes through. It comes through in the book.
In terms of the book, it really goes back 20 years, and this speaks to what Scott and I were talking about, our love of film and talking and exchanging ideas back and forth together. And I studied film in college, and for 20 years, I kind of had 4 films and 1 short story that kind of went into a soup that I just stirred. And the short story was A Continuity of Parks. It's only 2 paragraphs. You could be done in a minute or 2 by Julio Cortázar, called The Continuity of Parks. And then I had 4 films, and one was Vertigo, and Play Misty for Me, and Misery, and A Beautiful Mind. And I have always wanted to do a psychological thriller or a entertainment industry comeback story, but I never had the idea right, because so much has been done. Authors, Misery, not to put too fine of a point on it, and filmmakers and whatnot. And so it really didn't occur to me until Scott and I started working together. And then I said, wait a minute. I said, I don't think there has ever been a novel about an audiobook narrator that exists. And then all of a sudden, all of the 4 movies and the short story came together. And Scott and I had joked about this. I was all ready to continue with the Great Lakes saga, but for a creator, when an idea like that happens, you've got to move and act on it. And so I put everything aside and said, I'm going to go all in on this. And so then I started my research. And part of that was your wonderful show, Daniela, finding you and listening to these interviews and just seeing the kind of community was there. And I said, there's something there. I said, I want to highlight this. I want people to come away loving audiobook narrators. And I think too, if you just wanted to even share the book and say to your family and friends, do you want to know an entertaining way of what I do without the murder and mayhem? Listen to this. It could work as that.
I want to interject because Harry had a good point, and I challenge you, Harry. Harry says there was a movie and the title was In a World or In a Word. I think it was but that was, it's voiceover. And I was disappointed when I saw that because it was so voiceover. It wasn't, to me, they're different worlds completely. I just felt like it wasn't my world. And this book gave me narrator. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I have so many friends of mine who were in a world, and in a world is the phrase typically used, most commonly associated with Don LaFontaine. I'm actually on the board of directors for the Don LaFontaine voiceover lab. It's the movie trailer, in a world, where an asteroid is hurtling toward the Earth. Yeah, right.
And kudos. I mean, it's an amazing world, but it just doesn't feel like our world.
Yes, right. Exactly. That was very short form. Narrators, you all know it's a marathon, not a sprint. So that movie did deal with speaking aloud for a living, but narrator deals with immersing yourself in the story to a level that most voice actors aren't able to, just given the size of their jobs.
He speaks our language. You're talking booths. You're talking it's just so that brings me to how much did you guys, because I know that Landon said that Scott helped you with the details and everything. How much did you guys work together on it? Because you're already friends by now. You can tell you guys are friends. You speak shorthand to each other. You're friends. So how did you work together? Did you have worries about it in the beginning about the subject, or were you intrigued by it, Scott? Or
I'll tell you, Landon had done 4 volumes in the Great Lakes Saga, so we knew that there was going to be one more. But he let me know, and Gina, who works for me, let us know that, hey, I'm taking a quick left turn to do this murder mystery called Huron Breeze. And I was like, oh, well, that's lovely. It's all of the 5 Great Lakes Saga books have always been standalones, and yet with a few common characters, just so that we can kind of realize that it all takes place in the same.
So it's the world.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like the Clive Cussler books. There are 5 different series, but they all take place in what I call the Cussler verse.
I love when they do that, like Myron Bolitar for Harlan Coben.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So so here I was getting ready to do, I may not have the timing right, but it was in preparation for working on Huron Breeze, which
I think it was last November. We had a Zoom call about that, right? Our pre-recording kind of conference.
Right. And he said, would you be open to doing an interview just with me, just to chat with me? Because I have this idea. And he laid out the general plot of, let me know that it has a lot to do with audiobook narration. And as any good author would do, he wants to make sure that what he's writing about is correct. There are always, especially in thrillers, there are always going to be technical advisors. And quite often they're in the military to make sure that, whatever weapon you're talking about or, is dealt with accurately. Or
if anyone ever checks our search profiles, we would be arrested immediately.
God, yeah. I was working on a book years ago. It was a nonfiction title called Where Men Win Glory. And John Krakauer, amazing nonfiction writer, he was writing about Pat Tillman, the NFL star who gave up his stardom to go fight for his country in Iraq and Afghanistan, and wound up being killed by friendly fire. So they're talking about, it's spelled in capital letters, FOB Tillman, FOB, it stands for Forward Operating Base. And I'm like, well, you wouldn't say FOB Tillman. A fob is something that used to hold a watch. So the assumption was, and my researcher found out, well, okay, that you would say FOB Tillman rather than FOB Tillman. But then I called my best friend at the last minute, the night before the book was due, and he's a colonel in the military. And I said, are you sure? You know, can I really be sure? Is it FOB Tillman? He goes, oh no, it's definitely FOB Tillman. I'm like, really? Because I recorded the book saying FOB. And he goes, no, that's wrong. And I said, okay. And I'm trying to, I was mansplaining to another man, saying, but when you're working in audio, you have to make sure everything is accurate. And he finally cut me off and he says, Scott, I'm standing in FOB Tillman in Afghanistan right now. Okay. Well, it was.
Meantime, you've subjected him to 30 minutes of the narrator's rabbit hole.
Of mansplaining, right, exactly. Here's a colonel in the military taking my call while he's in Afghanistan at 120 degree heat. But Landon understood that there were going to be pitfalls like that with the narration. Yeah. And he said, I just want to make sure I'm accurate. For maybe it's 1% of the audience who will understand that you don't say, I'm going to hit the record button. And this is something that came up, you know, is it accurate to say, hit the record button? And I got back to him and said, no, because it's not hardware, it's software. So it's a thing when we say, I'm going to hit record, but it's not a thing when we say, I'm going to hit the record button.
There was nothing jarring in it. So you guys obviously communicated well. There was nothing in it that took me out of the story.
Right.
And that it was, but then also the characterizations were, I cannot wait to listen to the actual audiobook now, but I'm still in the middle of the cabin and I don't want to screw that up, but I'm very monogamous when it comes to my audiobook listening.
Well, I have to say, before, you know, getting back to Landon, he was very open to every single suggestion. And there was a time where, look, when he first talks to me about this, I'm like, oh yeah, you're going to write a book about a narrator. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Not that I was going to disbelieve it or doubt him, but I certainly never expected it, let alone expected it so soon. But suddenly there's a manuscript.
Let me interject one thing. And
please.
This is what heightened attention was. That night during that call, I had gotten through 4 questions and I had 10 for Scott, and the power went out and our Zoom call got cut off. And I'm like, we left with it. I was like, what is he thinking right now about what I just talked to him about? Waited 20 minutes, and then we could not get it, back up, and it didn't. And he got an email back to me. He's like, all right, brother, we'll talk soon. I'm like, oh shoot.
But your character has a very strong voice. The protagonist's character has a very strong voice. How fun was that to play as a narrator? I bet that was like quite a character to get into.
It really
James
was.
has already listened to the first 4 chapters, by the way, so you've got a season.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Landon made it very clear. He's like, okay, Sean Frost, the protagonist of narrator, he goes, it's not Scott Brick, but I think you were born to play the role. And so I wasn't looking at it like Landon was writing a book for me. Yeah. And yet it was a book, as he always pointed out, he goes, I think you were uniquely suited to narrate it. And it was, look, it's a thrill. And as you say, he has a very definite voice.
Yeah. It's like he existed before the book was written.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And, we always talk about the authorial voice, right? But there was also certain characters you realize, as you say so wonderfully, this character existed before page 1.
There's a movie about that too, isn't there? The famous female plays it and her character comes to life and doesn't want to be killed off. I can't remember the name. I got to see that movie. Somebody
Well,
type in chat if you remember what that movie is. But that's exactly how it feels with Landon's book. That like the character's got a life.
I actually, I've never had this experience before. I'm not here to toot my own horn and say, well, I've done 1,000 audiobooks, so tap 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 with a cigarette, get low to me. Fact of the matter is, I have never had an experience where it was so personal, and the reason why is because a lot of that interview that we did, Landon is recording it. He's jotting down notes and things that I told him wind up in the freaking book. I mean, at one point, this was kind of my favorite experience of it was, other than, there's a scene at the Audies where Sean Frost, the protagonist of Narrator, he's at a table in the audience of the Audies, and at the other table are, correct me if I'm wrong, Landon, there's Porter for Ray Porter, there's Fraley for Pat Fraley, both of them, two of my dearest friends, Freeman, who's my girlfriend, Suzanne Elise Freeman,
Simon Vance.
He says Vance. He's only used last names. Vance for Simon Vance, also a dear friend, and then Brick. And I'm like, I'm talking about myself. This is weird. But later in the book, somebody, Sean Frost says, people asked me one time, they ask me all the time, what's it like being a famous audiobook narrator? And I always think of a colleague of mine who has always said, being a famous audiobook narrator is like being the tallest midget in the room. And I read that out loud and went, fuck, sorry, I'm sorry. But it was like, fucking hell, are you kidding me? That's me. I'm the one who's always said that. When he says, a colleague of mine has always said that it's like this, I'm like, I'm the colleague. If Sean Frost is a narrator, then Scott Brick is his colleague. And I'm reading my own lines out loud.
That's what I love about it. That's what I was talking about, the Mr. Coffee, when I listened to a thriller. I wanted to feel like like I'm in the life, in the world. So Landon did this genius thing and merged your worlds with the character's world. So like it kind of becomes shady. It's kind of faded, what's real, what's not real, and so then you lose yourself in the story. It was literally like, I can't imagine that he didn't do it on purpose, but I get the feeling he didn't. Like, it's you, by bringing so many real life elements in and mentioning so many things that we would know that would trigger us, especially Scott sounded very triggered. But you're merging it. He's merging it. James Romick said he laughed at that bit. And that's, the people that know are going to know. We're going to listen and watch and read because we know it's our world. And also
I had so much respect for just the industry and the professionals that are in it that I wanted it to be a book for them that they could look at and enjoy. And also, like Scott said, for the 1%, we wanted to make sure that we got it right. And so I was really intimidated to approach Scott because I knew of what I wanted the book to be. And so that's why I did so much ahead of time. But then he was very generous with his time and took a look at a draft. And that's probably the place where our relationship, if I would say to other narrators in the room here that know and work with authors, that we had the trust, and it was a marketplace of ideas. I mean, he's right. I have my turf and he has his, but to be able, the collaboration was, well, what if we tried this? Or I think this would work better. To be able to talk about that and let the best idea win was fantastic. And I would add this too, that I am an independently published author, and maybe traditional publishing, maybe that'll be down the line someday. That'd be great, but I'm really happy where I'm at. But Scott Brick, for all of his accolades, his status in the industry, never once made me feel less. Never once made me feel like, well, this is how I deal with indie authors and this is how I deal with traditional.
No, you're not going to find any narrators that would do that, though. I mean, Scott, do you agree? Indie is just, in our minds, it's the quality of the writing, isn't it? Or am I being naive?
It's the same thing with traditional print publishing. There are going to be, look, I'm a narrator because I'm a book fan, right?
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
books. But as a fan, I have my favorites and my least favorites. And it's typically that falls along the line, not so much of genre, but of the writing. I've read books in disparate categories just for fun and for enlightenment, but I always follow the writing rather than the genre or the author.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, you know, in self-publishing, sure, there are those challenges out there. But then there's the books that sing as you're reading them, and you can hear them in your mind. And that's why I think that's why. Look, if Landon was a lesser writer than he is, it doesn't matter how many dinners that we had together, how many old movies that we loved that we had in common. I would still be kind of rolling my eyes when it's like, oh, great, there's another book by this author.
And that's what I was getting at when I so rudely interrupted Landon. Sorry, but that's the thing. You're a good writer, and I think something else occurred to me, Scott. And I'm not sure. I don't know how your business model is, but I get the feeling that you have Gina to field a lot of the businessy conversations, so you can go straight into the creative fire and the work. And that's a note to narrators that don't have a Gina, although we would all love a Gina. If you don't have a Gina, try to deal with am I right, with the money and the business side of it is not the important side. Get it done, know your boundaries, do your deals, and then get into because the only way you get what you and Landon have is if the two of you are working toward the art. Am I right?
Well, yeah. Look, I again, as I'm talking to my colleagues, those of you who aspire to have a relationship with an author the way that Landon and I have, ask yourself, does the author really get it? Do they understand that audio is different than print? And they're going to be, look, in the Dune series, there was a moment where they talked about the planet Ix, and they spoke about its derivation was originally, it was called something completely different, Wallach 9, but Wallach 9 would be the Wallach star system. Wallach 9 would be spelled Wallach IX because it's Roman numerals. And so there was a time where the print version was trying to talk about how they left off the Wallach and they just looked at the IX. But read aloud, I would still have to say Wallach 9, Wallach Roman numeral 9, Wallach IX. We just started calling it X.
Yeah.
I reached out and they totally understood and they said, hey, we trust you. When you're looking for a relationship, is your author going to be open to things like, okay, so there's a time I don't like the punch and roll.
James
everybody
mentioned that.
Oh, funny. I don't like the punch and roll. Everybody in the audience, I know you already know what it is. I use a tally clicker. And it's the thing that, like, when you're walking into an event and they have to count how many people are at the door, how many people are actually going to be on the premises, they hold that little metal thing in their hand that goes click, 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 however many times you do it. And that will spike the waveform. I always refer to it as an EKG. It's like the heartbeat, click, 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 click. Well, my editor knows how to go in and find out that, okay, that's a retake. Everything from that point on is okay. Let's just take out the clicks and go back to his previous take and marry it together. Landon talks about that in his book. And at one point, he starts talking about the tally clicker to alert the editor that he's doing a retake. And I reached out to him and I said, you know what? I don't know if you're using the words tally clicker, but I don't know that everybody in the listening audience will know what that is. How about if I just do that? When the line says, so I use the tally clicker to let him know. How about if I pause between tally clicker and let him know and just click, 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 click. And I let my editor know, don't cut that one out.
Oh, that's smart.
And he was like, oh yeah, great. That would be terrific. When to all of our colleagues, when you're working with an author, try to explain things like that. And they're not going to come up very often, but you want to make sure that you're working with somebody who who gets it and realizes that, oh, sure, that can't be represented in the text, but it can be represented in the audio. And in this case, it's all about the audio.
Well, it's how does it feel to you, Landon, when the relationship you have in Scott, does that add to the satisfaction of the finished product of the book, to the sense of pride because of the friendship's a real thing, isn't it? It's a tangible thing. In addition, the collaboration and everything, it adds an extra layer, and I think it comes through in the book.
It does. I mean, I care a lot about Scott as a person and as a professional in the industry, and have a tremendous amount of respect for him. And after we had that dinner conversation, it was just a different level of ideas. And so one of the things, because of my creative side, sometimes what it takes to get inspired, to get into the writing room or to think about things, I'm thinking about this stuff all the time. And I said, what if there was this audiobook narrator that had booth rituals before ending a series and would listen to The Lonely Man, the Incredible Hulk theme? And I told Scott about that. And this is one of those areas where I say, what if you listen to that before you record and see what kind of, creative juice that gives you inside the booth? So in order to be able to make those kind of suggestions has been just wonderful. For the murder mystery, I only sent him one thing. I sent him the film Night Moves, which is a hidden gem of 1970s noir. And I said, all you have to do to get ready for this one, Scott, is watch this and then have at it. For the one that was The Hike, it's Breaking Bad meets The Godfather, I sent him the sunglasses, and I sent him Walter White's hat, and I said, for the booth, and I said, have at it for that.
I love that.
I have to say that when that idea was introduced in Narrator, because there's a character, Nehemiah Stone, who, he is his own, it's the book within the book, the book series that Sean Frost narrates within Narrator. And yet it reminded me a great deal of the Jack Reacher novels, which I got to take over from Dick Hill about 5 years ago. And look, in many ways, Jack Reacher is the lonely man. And because, he walks alone, but quite often, for those of you who follow the series, quite often, he'll make a connection with somebody and he'll say, hey, I have to move on. Do you want to come with me? Because he may deny his loneliness, and yet he walks alone. And I reached out to Landon, and I said, not only did I, FYI, Landon doesn't even know this, The Lonely Man used to be my ringtone, because I loved the Incredible Hulk TV series as a kid so much that I actually, when I was first able to dictate, choose what my ringtone would be from an actual recording, I had it for like 6 months. I had to change it because it's so soft. The piano melody is so soft, and I couldn't hear it when people were calling me if I was outdoors. So, but anyway, that music has always resonated with me. I listened to it before I did Narrator, and as I told Landon, I will listen to that. I start a new Reacher book in a month. A month from today, I'm going to be recording the new one. It's called No Plan B, and I told him, life imitates art. I will be listening to the listening. I will be listening to the Lonely Man before I start my Reacher book. The next
for this one, Daniela, there were so many pop cultural references because it's an entertainment story, and so I wanted it to really be layered with that, because Sean Frost is a 2-time Tony Award-winning playwright and actor who has a fall from grace and reinvents himself as an audiobook narrator. So that's kind of the story behind.
But the references make the world real. I love that's part of what I loved so much about it.
Thanks. So I sent Scott every single pop cultural reference in an email that had from Michael Douglas in The Game to The Thing, where you've got Kurt Russell, throwing a lighter, swearing.
Oh yeah.
And there are parts where, from reading it, where Sean gets into that and he makes that connection, because a lot of us creative folks do that. We think, oh, I remember this from this movie. We act it out for 30 seconds when nobody's looking, and then we go back to our normal life. And so what was cool was there were parts in the book where it was neat because I could tell Scott had kind of looked at it, and then he molded that into his performance, which was great. So I always send those things just, hey, buddy, take it or leave it, whatever might help you creatively. Not to say, hey, can you do this scene like this? Or could you really narrate chapter 26 like this? It isn't that at all, but it's anything that we can work together. And conversely, there are a dozen times he came back to me and said, you should have him be, I can't remember how many inches away from the mic, because that's what I do when I whisper. And I said, yes, change it. Absolutely.
See, I love that, because I have a writer that would send me Pinterest boards, Pinterest mood boards. Like, I love that kind of shorthand, anything that you can do to communicate.
Yeah. I always look at it like, okay, if I'm casting an audiobook in my head, if I'm working on a book and I think, you know what? I did a vampire detective series years ago by Charlie Houston, the Joe Pitt Chronicles. And there was a guy he had who was essentially, he was in the, oh God, who's the familiar in Dracula? It was Renly? No, I forget the name of the character, but there was a guy who was written to be that kind of character, a guy who makes things happen. You can go out, send him out on an errand, and he is connected to the vampire. Renfield, thank you. Yeah. He's connected to the vampire, and in this series, the way he was written reminded me so much of Joe Pesci. And what I never once did a Joe Pesci imitation, but when I hear it in my head, the listener will hear it in their ear. Yeah. So I would do, it doesn't, you're not doing an imitation, but it colors the performance, and that's what Landon is talking about here. There was a reference from the Towering Inferno. Sean would always use this one line, and I watched the Towering Inferno 10 or 12 times in the movie theater in 1975, I think it was, when it came out. My father ran a Western auto store, and the movie theater was just down the block, and so yeah, my dad would give me 50 cents. Hey kid, go watch a movie. And look, I watched that thing a dozen times, and yet when it came time to do that line, I was never doing an imitation, but I remembered that it colored the writing, so I listened to it so it would color my narration.
I love that. That's what
the answer to your primary question, Daniela, was through all the books, it's been great when they finally come out to market, and that listeners are going to get to hear the performance or read the book. But this one was different. It was just in another category because of the subject matter and the amount of work that we both put into this. I'm tired today. And I know Scott
but this book is special. This book is special.
Yeah.
We got to today. I just couldn't be happier or more proud of what we created together. That will always be special and kind of a moment in time. And I told Scott this before, I don't know, not to get wistful or anything, but I said, I don't know if I would ever write another book like this. It was 20 years to think this up to where I invested and went all in on it. I don't know if I'll ever have another one like it.
You will. That's art. I have a theory, but then again, I might be too much of a romantic, but I think that when you create true, lasting, proper art, like the divine inspired kind, where the character doesn't come from you, it comes from something, that sucks your soul dry, and then you need more of it, and you create more.
And I wanted to be fair too on this call. I believe that Julia Whalen has a book coming out today that was called Thanks for Listening, where there's an audiobook narrator in a romance, but it sounds a lot like what Scott and I did. And so I think
that's exciting. It's today. I knew it was coming out. She's coming on the Cup of Joe. She's coming on the Cup of Joe. If it's about a narrator, that's my new rule. If it's about a narrator, we will be all about the book. I'm happy to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, so they both came out today, which I think is a great day for audiobooks, but I want to pay her the respect of saying, hey, remember, we were first on August 2nd. They both came out today, but I'd like to think of it more of Tombstone and Wyatt Earp when they came out in 1993 and 1994.
Right.
Exactly
Oh God,
6 months away. So I'm happy to be either Tombstone or Wyatt Earp to whatever Julia's is.
Well, we will
But
definitely chat about that.
kudos and
Thanks for
congrats
letting
to
me.
her too. I think that's an amazing story. I think that she had to tell too. It's a romance and something really neat.
Okay, and then they're all chomping at the bit. I have got a gift to give away. Now that I've told you guys how amazing I think this book is. But I do want to say thank you, Leslie. The name of that movie was Stranger Than Fiction with Emma Thompson. Yes, it was. I'm going to so rewatch that because that's what Sean reminded me of, a character that lived kind of on his own. And then also Renfield, thanks for that. That was from Becky. Okay, guys, for those of you that joined the lottery, we had 18 people. What you do when I pull the name, please send me a direct message or any way you can. Send me your email address and I will send it to Landon. And I finally got to get my hat out. I never get to wear my hat now that I don't leave the flat too much. Okay, so I've never done this before. Excuse me while I milk it for a moment. This was Landon's idea, and it was a brilliant idea. Okay, bells, whistles. Sean Cordery. Sean, are you on the call? Sean, you are the winner of the audiobook for narrators. So please send me your email address and I will make sure that Landon gets it. And you guys, this has been a complete joy. I'm so happy that you joined. And I'm so happy that you wrote the book, that you narrated the book. And I'm still in the middle of Cabin, so no spoilers. And I will be listening to narrator as well, which is very rare for me. I very rarely read a book and then listen to them. But you guys, it's so good. Okay. Any last words of wisdom? Anything you would like to leave with? Let's start with Scott, since I've got you on screen, then we'll go to Landon. Anything you'd like to leave with the YouTube audience in the next 60 years?
Oh, wow. I think when we record this today, I think it was day before yesterday, that Bill Russell, the magnificent, the greatest winner in the history of American team sports, Bill Russell, he won 11 titles, including 8 in a row with the Boston Celtics. And he would say, tongue in cheek, as I do now, because I don't want to be blasphemous, but he would always talk about heaven. And he would think that when the time came, he passed away at 88, just the day before yesterday. He always said when the time came, he wondered if heaven would feel like a step down, because heaven for him felt like playing with the Boston Celtics. Pardon me, felt like playing with the Boston Celtics. That's how he felt for his entire career. And I've always felt that narrating audiobooks is heaven to me. It's what heaven looks like. And but specifically while working on a book so deeply researched and with a guy who's my friend and an author who inspires me, that's what heaven looks like for me. So I'm just really grateful for this experience. I'm thankful that it comes out today and that other people can experience it along with me.
I love that. I love that. Thank you very much, Scott. Landon, for the YouTube audience in the next 60 years who will be buying your book and enjoying it, what words would you like to leave us with?
Well, I think I'd start with, if it is 60 years from now and you're watching this, unless they've invented certain bots that keep us alive for 2,000 years, Scott and I will be long gone by now. But I would say to the person who's watching this, look up my 2 girls, and say hi to them. I hope they're doing well, and tell them from me they're enough, that they're enough. They'll always be enough, no matter what's happened, the triumphs, the disappointments over the last years. I love you, I'm proud of you, and that you are enough. If you're a creator and you're trying to make it in the business, I would tell you the same thing, that you are enough. You don't need anyone's affirmation or permission. And if you learn to control what you can control and let go of what you can't, and that you're enough, two lessons that took this guy a long time to learn. And if you make it before 19 years like me, then celebrate, you beat me. And if you are at the 19 or plus point, I would argue that you are in it for the right reasons. I used to be a teacher, and we used to say that you could tell who was in it for the right reasons and who wasn't. The people that thought they just got 3 months off in the summer usually fizzled out within the first 2 or 3 years. And the people that were in it for the right reasons made a career out of it and never felt like they worked a day in their life. And so I wish you well, stick with it, and you will make it. And maybe at some point you try hard enough, you will be blessed with someone like Scott Brick, who came into my life and gave me a chance when I didn't know if that would ever happen. And I'm grateful for that. And today this book called Narrator came out that commemorates just what I think of him. Thank you.
Oh, you guys, it's the power of friendship, right? It's tangible. It's magic. And that's what was on the show on this call. Scott?
I have two, just one last word, forgive me. I have two framed letters outside my booth. About 2 months ago, I received the most elaborate fan mail I've ever gotten in my life. And it was 3 feet tall, 2 feet wide, written on the back of really elaborate high-end wrapping paper. And the guy drew these illustrations about books that meant a lot to him that I had happened to narrate.
Wow.
And so I took a photo of this, and I thought, well, who would appreciate this? And I reached out to 2 authors I work with. One of them is A.M. Khalifa. Ayman Khalifa is a lovely man, an Egyptian writer. He lives in Rome, writes thrillers. I'm like, I have a connection with him similar to the one that I have with Landon. So I emailed it to him, and I emailed it to Landon, and I said, I think it was Landon who wrote back and says, "Oh my God, you have to frame that." And I said, "I will. I'm planning on it, and I'm going to put it right next to the framed letter that I got from you." And and he wrote back, and he's like, "You framed that letter I sent you?" And I'm like, "Did I never tell you that?" One of them is a fan letter, obviously the most recent one, but I had such a touching letter from Landon about a year ago, and they stay outside of my booth so I can see them every day. For those of you in the audience, look for work that inspires you every single day. I look at those letters and they inspire me. So
you do know that now I'm going to spend all night till 5 a.m. sending long, meaningful messages to all my writers that I love. Like,
I hope you will.
The ones that have become dear friends, just like, I love you, don't.
Well, I would say too, for the narrators that are on this call, Scott, of course, has his own business and has that side of it beyond getting, contracted by traditional publishers. But if you're thinking of, being more of an entrepreneur in the business, and I know Scott has some fantastic workshops, from an author standpoint, yeah, reach out, give somebody a chance. If you have a good feeling about it, they will appreciate it if you feel connected to the work.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we shall wrap up. This has been wonderful. I'm humbled.
It's been lovely for us.
And
Thanks,
guys,
Daniela.
listen to the book. Seriously, I can't wait. I've got to finish Cabin. Don't tell me what happens. Bye, guys. Bye, everyone. Mwah! Thanks for joining. Sean, send me your email address. Bye, everyone.
Bye.